and welcome to today's webinar, Mastering the IoT Connectivity Opportunity. My name is John King. I'm Commercial Officer at Kaleido Intelligence. I'll be your host for today's webinar. And over the next 45 minutes or so, there's, as always, quite a lot of new insight that we have to share with you, and there's some quite interesting discussion points that we want to go through as well, all looking at how specifically, service providers can ensure that their cellular connectivity offerings are capable both now and moving forward of meeting those evolving demands of end customers. So in a moment, we'll go through today's agenda, we'll go through the different resources that will be coming your way for joining us today, and we'll go through how you can contribute as we proceed over the next 45 minutes. But firstly, and as always, let's give a nice introduction to the speakers that we have with us today. So I'm thrilled to share that we have Nir Shalom, CEO of FlowLive, with us today, and we have Stefan Sol, a fellow founder also from Kaleido Intelligence, with us. So, gentlemen, fantastic to have you with us, and let me invite you just to come off of mute and give a quick introduction to your roles within your companies. Nir, let's start with yourself.
Okay, thank you very much, John, and good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Great to be here. Nir Shalom, I'm the CEO of FlowLive, and I'm looking forward to talk about some of the items we have lined for this call. And I saw some questions coming already, so very happy to take them. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Nir. Stefan, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, thanks, John. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here, as always. As John mentioned, one of the founders of Kaleido. Essentially, my role is to lead the research of our IoT connectivity portfolio. So everything cellular IoT and satellite connectivity is what we look into there.
Perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. As always, I know you guys have got lots to share with us as we go. So with that in mind, let's move on. Let's have a quick look at the agenda that we're going through today. So as you can see, so we're looking at, again, mastering the IoT connectivity opportunity. Now, when we talk about that, that's very much an umbrella term, right? And depending on where you are based in the world, depending on where your clients are based, what vertical, most of your clients are coming from, what their requirements are, so the strategy will differ of what you're looking at. Now, today, obviously, we can't go into all the different verticals and different breakdowns, but today what we are looking at is we're looking at this specifically from a service provider perspective, very much taking a global remit and looking at those technological components that are needed and how that can best cater for those evolving connectivity requirements of end customers. Now, if you are new to Kaleido webinars, it's fantastic to have you here today. So Kaleido, we're a research company specializing in the cellular IoT connectivity space. And whenever we do these sorts of sessions, the key for us is we're not just talking generically about markets, but we're actually bringing new insights to the market to help educate as well. And today's no different. So what we've done recently in the build up to this event is we've conducted an annual survey directly with IoT service providers, which over 200 took part. And really what that's showing us is it's assessing what their customer demands are, their technological priorities, common challenges and pain points, success stories as well. So Stefan will be sharing about that in the first part of the webinar, and then that will feed very much into what Nir will then come and present from FlowLive's perspective. Obviously, FlowLive being a company who are working with service providers, to really help that transformation of offerings to be meeting that end client demand. So then Nir will come in and share from his perspective, really adding some of the, practical steps, to what these points look like and how we address some of these pain points and opportunities from a, on the ground perspective. We'll then finish, as you can see, with a time for discussion and audience Q&A. So we have a few discussion points already lined up. And the same with all of these webinars, we really want to hear from you as we go as well. So to submit your questions, your comments as we go through, as Stefan shares from our insights, as Nir shares from FlowLive's perspective, please use the chat feature. Very simple. You can see the chat icon there probably in the bottom right-hand corner or across the bottom of your screen. Very simple. Just open that up, type in your questions as we go, and then we have that dedicated time at the end to be addressing them. Now, a final point before I hand over to Stefan to be going through those survey findings. Of course, the whole point of putting on any webinar shows from Kaleido's perspective is that these are educational events. that we're running across cellular IoT, really for the point of informing and educating yourselves, the audience. And again, today's no different. So what you're joining us for now, the recording from today's session, alongside the deck that we'll be presenting, will be made available to you post-webinar. In addition to that, you can see on the right-hand side of your screen, there's a new white paper that we've been working on as well. And in that white paper, that'll be coming your way shortly post-event, that really builds on some of those survey findings that we're presenting today, but it adds in additional strategic analysis from Kaleido side as a research company that can be tying in the needs, requirements we see directly from enterprises, because we do a lot of survey work with them as an audience directly as well. So there's a lot of information coming your way in that piece as well post-event, all with the, I guess, goal, objective of helping to inform your own individual strategies within your companies. And so keep an eye out for your emails in the following days post this event for all of those resources. But I think that takes us to a nice point for the introductions. So, Stefan, let me hand over to yourself to share more and take us through these survey findings.
Absolutely. Thanks, John. So yeah, I mean, just a quick recap of the survey. As John mentioned, over 200 respondents, actually 211 respondents, mainly composed of what people deem themselves as IoT service providers, IoT MVNOs, as well as a large contingent of MNO respondents as well, and a smaller contingent of players like MVNEs, connectivity resellers, and systems integrators. But every single one of these players is actively involved in providing IoT connectivity as a service provider. And in terms of the geographical distribution of the respondents, we're looking primarily at around 30% of respondents from North America and Europe, 15% from Asia Pacific, less China, with the remainder of respondents scattered around the world, larger proportion from Latin America. So a very good mix of respondents, I think, and that allowed us to gather some interesting data insights when we look at how different cohorts of respondents view different areas of the market. But we'll look at that in a minute. Let's kick off in terms of the classic one. What are the challenges of the market that you see today? And I think the top results are actually quite telling and very interesting as well, because normally you see something like security topping every survey when it comes to IoT. I mean, it's still up there. You can see the lighter blue split is referring to MNOs, the darker blue split referring to non-MNOs. But you can see, actually, while security is a strong challenge as perceived by the industry as a whole today, actually much more so are the growing concerns over things like compliance as well as global coverage. And actually, when you think about it a little more, coverage is very much interlinked with compliance, because even though you might say you have a global solution, if you're not compliant in, let's say, Turkey with permanent roaming and so on, you're not going to be able to provide connectivity in that particular country. So therefore, you don't have global coverage. And of course, there are other challenges to look at there. I mean, some different kinds of differences between the different players. MNOs perhaps more concerned today over higher connectivity costs. Non-MNOs more concerned over things like complex or complex billing or pricing models, or visibility and control over connected devices. And I think actually, this introduces quite an interesting set of themes that we can potentially look at. However, let's move on to the next slide, because I thought it would be interesting to compare, how do challenges evolve as they are perceived today versus 2 to 5 years in the future. And you can see in terms of the split, so the non-MNO cohort is represented by the 2 pie charts at the top, MNO cohort represented by the 2 pie charts at the bottom. So today, top 3 challenges among non-MNOs: integrations with multiple CMPs or platforms, local regulatory compliance, and global coverage. When we look 2 to 5 years ahead, we see an interesting shift in that direction as more non-MNOs become concerned with things like competition, commoditization of connectivity, cybersecurity, as well as technological disruption. Whereas on the MNO side of things, today you have security and compliance as top challenges alongside global coverage. So actually among both non-MNOs and MNOs, compliance and coverage lead in terms of today's challenges. For MNOs, when we look 2 to 5 years ahead, they see increasing regulatory restrictions as a major concern. See, MNOs are often involved with large deployments in highly regulated industries. And today we're seeing more and more impacts in that area, not only in terms of the regulations as well, but the liabilities that are associated with that. Meanwhile, MNOs are also concerned with commoditization of connectivity airtime, as well as a continuing concern over cybersecurity. So I think there's some interesting points to draw out there. I mean, today, regulatory compliance and coverage, it means essentially that there needs to be a shift in how service providers go about supporting IoT if they want to service customers who have multi-country, multi-regional, or even global connectivity. The issue over connectivity commoditization means that the traditional models of airtime connectivity and relying on that alone are no longer enough, and which is why we see a shift in the marketplace in terms of how service providers are approaching the market. We see a lot more opportunities in terms of collaboration and evolving the market to meet enterprise requirements. Of course, connectivity, security, so data security, I think will always be top of mind. It's interesting to see that non-MNOs have technological disruption, for example, AI as a concern when looking into the future. But actually, perhaps as we'll see later, this may be an opportunity rather than a risk itself, because a lot of these challenges are really related to how does this impact the bottom line? But we want to think about what are the things that you can consider to actually turn those negative impacts into opportunities. Okay, let's move to the next slide, please, John. So we're going to look at a number of key themes. So infrastructure, in terms of asset visibility, very much related to aspects such as cybersecurity, optimization, even the most basic of connectivity management features, which is cost control. Essentially, what we're looking at here is, are you capable of providing your customers with real-time visibility into the network? What does that mean? It means that when there's a change in it, or when there's a network event, when there's a change in device state, can you relay that back to the platform and then the customer within real time, within near real time, let's say? Because if you don't, how then can you see in a timely fashion that something is happening with your network that perhaps you don't want to? How can you see that perhaps a runaway device is consuming much more data than it should, and therefore not be able to control what kind of costs that device is racking up, for example? So I think this is a very interesting area to look at, and the results themselves are quite telling. Today we see 63% of MVNOs and MVNEs. I think we wanted to make an apples to apples comparison here, because MNOs, MVNOs, full MVNOs, let's say MVNEs, all own their own core network infrastructure. So apples to apples comparison here. 63% of MVNOs, MVNEs currently are able to support real-time network information and channeling back to the customer, whereas only 49% of MNOs are capable today. That's because 51% of those MNOs only have partial levels of real-time information. And this really relates to not only the deployment of international infrastructure, but also, how you're integrating with your partners. So it's interesting to see that actually the so-called challengers in the market, the MVNOs, the MVNEs, are actually in a better place right now. And we can see why when we move to the right-hand side chart. So as you may recall, we did a very similar survey in collaboration with FlowLive last year, where we're also interested in real-time information. And we can see from the non-MNO cohort, 2024, only 28% reported being able to provide real-time visibility into the network. This year's cohort, 60%. So you can see there's a dramatic increase in how at least non-MNO service providers have seen what's happening in the market and invested accordingly. I think that's really interesting to see. Let's move on to the next slide, please, John. Again, on the topic of infrastructure, and today we're looking at breakouts. So here, local regional breakouts are traditionally deployed for not only performance enhancements over traditional roaming, because traditional roaming is home routed, so the data trombones back to the home network and back to the device, latency is increased. And meanwhile, it's looking at solving the challenge of regulation. We saw regulation and compliance as a key issue earlier. What if you could keep the payload data within a specific country or region where those regulations say that that data is not allowed to cross borders in the manner that might be done with home-routed roaming? So, two key benefits to breakouts there. And we can see, actually, I think generally when we look at both MNOs and non-MNOs, there's an industry-wide recognition that this type of infrastructure is very necessary. So today, 77% of MNOs reported having local breakouts outside of their home network, 60% of non-MNOs, and only 4% and respectively 3% of MNOs and non-MNOs report not having any plans to deploy that. So a really tiny proportion of the market that's not looking to introduce this kind of flexibility for their customers in future. And we can see why when we look to the pie chart on the right. So what does that equate to? 78% of respondents saying that local breakouts are either extremely important or very important for their customers. Okay, perhaps let's move to the next slide, please, John. Obviously, we couldn't do a connectivity survey on cellular IoT without talking about eSIM. Obviously, a big year for eSIM. I think will have quite significant impacts on the market. So obviously, SGP32, which is the interesting name for the eSIM IoT specification, introduces simplification in architecture, introduces protocols for constrained devices, introduces a much more interesting way of managing eSIMs. So really quite a lot of excitement around this. And today we can see that the vast majority of MNOs as well as MNOs are really involved in either implementing it right now or in the process of implementing it or having it planned for the very near future. Victor, just quickly on your question of non-MNOs. So those are all the IoT MVNOs, IoT service providers, MVNEs, connectivity aggregators, systems integrators. So back onto eSIM, how does it impact the market? And I think we can see overwhelmingly that respondents see flexibility in remote profile management as a core benefit. And that's, linked to the EIM, rather than having a silly SMSR, SMDP infrastructure, which is difficult to deploy, difficult to manage in terms of integrations, carrier swaps, and so on. So hopefully we're going to see a lot of improvement in that area. What I think is interesting as well is improved coverage as a major benefit. And perhaps the reason for that is because of the simplification of the specification, more MNOs will be encouraged to participate in the ecosystem. After all, they can reuse investments made in SMDP Plus for consumer eSIM. And meanwhile, OEMs, because of this flexibility in that profile management, flexibility in terms of adapting to constrained devices, more OEMs will be onboarded as well. So we'll have much better connectivity choice, which will lead on to more interesting scenarios, as we'll look at in a minute, of course. Perhaps we move on to the next slide, John. And this is one of those impacts. And this is certainly a growing trend that we've seen in the market over the last 3 years or so. But when you bring eSIM IoT into the picture, let's think back to what I just said in terms of connectivity choice, more MNOs, more OEMs. What does that mean? It means that there will be a greater connectivity choice on the market, but also greater utilization and deployment of diverse connectivity management platforms among global fleets. And really, when we look back to our own enterprise surveys, 76% of enterprises in our last 2024 survey, 1,000 enterprises, reported contracting with more than one connectivity service provider. The more contracts you have, the more complex things become. What do you need? You need a single pane of glass. You want a single invoice point, single contact point, if possible. That's the kind of a holy grail. And this is what CMP overlay or aggregation is about. And this is why we see 79% of MNOs, 51% of non-MNOs saying that this type of solution is going to be crucial in the market. And I think, that belief is heavily driven by what's happening in terms of the eSIM market today. Just a point of interesting note, we can see 89% of MNOs today using a dedicated connectivity management portal. 57% of non-MNOs are also using the same, perhaps also preferring to use a BI-based portal. Okay, let's move on to the next topic. So VoLTE is actually, I think, sometimes overlooked in terms of IoT. We don't see much discussion, at least when you see all the different white papers and stuff coming out on the market. Voice is actually a crucial aspect of IoT connectivity for certain applications. And we wanted to look at where that kind of applies, both in a near-term scenario and a mid-term scenario. So today, not surprisingly, we can see the highest demand is for emergency applications, 53% saying crucial, while 47% for automotive saying somewhat important. Let's remember that circuit switch technology, so 2G, 3G is being shut down around the world. You can see why emergency applications today, it's crucial, because if you're in a lift or you have a fall detector, those types of applications, you can't rely on a 2G network, which no longer is no longer there. You need VoLTE. When we look into the midterm, we can see overwhelmingly automotive emergency applications and even other applications massively increasing in importance where VoLTE is concerned. So, that requires quite a complex deployment in terms of IMS. Today's roaming agreements are still building up, and there are other issues as well. And we can see from our survey cohorts, monetization is really a standout point for me, as well as regulatory challenges, so things like data traffic, so cross-border data and local laws as well. So yeah, it really is a relatively complex area to address, but at the same time, a very important one. Okay, so I think one final slide from me, as far as I remember, which is AI. So I talked a little bit about technology disruption at the beginning, and here we can see to what extent AI-driven services are requested by service provider customers. And actually 16% of respondents as a whole reporting high demand, so active development of services, split there by region, 27% North America, 10% Europe, and 9% Asia Pacific, less China. But 72% are, let's say now, exploring AI solutions. And I think this is a very interesting area to look at. I think we'll discuss this a bit later, but it has a lot of applications, not only in terms of optimization, but perhaps even in terms of the story it can tell customers. I'm going to close it out there and hand back over to you, John.
Thank you, Stefan, for that. Well, there's a lot of information there to build on, especially some fascinating differences, right, in the priorities, but also approaches and challenges from the MNO versus non-MNO audience. So thank you so much for sharing that, and I know we'll come back and touch on some of these areas as well later. Yeah, please do keep the questions coming in. So if you joined us a bit late, questions as you go through the chat icon on the right-hand side, bottom corner. And of course, all this information that we're showing, don't worry, is coming your way post-webinar. But in the interest of time, let us hand over, because we've looked through the insights, we've looked at some of these key findings from the survey, and now it ties us really nicely into then hearing, from there in the perspective of FlowLive for those actually working in the industry, working with companies, addressing some of these, challenges head on. So, Nir, please come back on with us, come off of mute, and it's a pleasure to hand over to yourself and really hear about, from your perspective, from that view from the ground, what you're seeing and the work that you're doing, aligned to these findings and topics as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very interesting survey. Reading the detailed results of the survey, it's even more interesting. So let's move on to the next slide and talk a little bit about FlowLive, what we do, and mainly our perspective of the market. So just for anyone that doesn't know FlowLive too much, basically we are enabling our partners, which are primarily MNOs and MVNOs and IoT service providers, with secure communication technologies, primarily with global coverage, with the technology underneath, and with the global robust infrastructures, and we are trying to provide good support to our customers. Today, we are serving a little bit more than 60 mobile network operators, MVNOs, and service providers globally. And we are going to talk about the solution we believe serves the customers best. But one hint is that it includes many core networks under management, and we have more than 80 of these cores globally deployed in more than 30 countries. So this is just to get an understanding of FlowLive. Let's move on to the next slide and dive a little bit deeper into the topics. So if I'm summarizing Stefan's presentation and the survey results, we can basically, we call it the 7 golden requirements of customers. We can look on 7 things that customers will always look for. Some of them, and when I'm talking about customers, I'm talking about our end customers, the OEMs, the enterprises that you serve and we serve you to serve them, are looking for these requirements to be supported. Obviously each one of them with different flavors, and maybe one will emphasize one item more than the other, but coverage is king. Obviously, this is number 1. Reliability and availability, security and compliance. We've seen that in the report as well. Simplicity. I'm not sure that the last survey was talking a lot about simplicity, but Stefan did talk about that when he talked about a single bill, single support contact, a single API, and all that. Customers are looking to simplify their IoT operations. Obviously, performance is becoming a topic, and when there is an issue, and there are always issues with connectivity, unfortunately, to be able to support customers and solve their issues quickly. These are the things that when we look on a global solution for customers, we primarily look to solve. And the solutions we are putting in place are coming to solve these topics, as also reflected in the survey that Stefan was showing before. Let's move on to the next slide and talk about the solutions. So we talk about the solutions broadly in the market, and I don't think that I'm saying anything new for anyone. We're talking primarily about 3 types of solutions. Number 1 is the roaming-based solutions. The roaming-based solutions is the most common solution today in the market, and they are coming in 2 shapes and forms. One is, plain roaming, as mentioned before, rooted back to the MNOs or MVNOs core location, or the enhanced solution for roaming, which is roaming with the localized UPFs, packet gateways that allow local termination of the payload in specific regions or countries or even specific customers' locations. These are becoming more and more common in the market today. The second solution, which is somewhat overlapping with roaming, is the multi-IMSI solution. Multi-IMSI basically does two things. One, it takes multiple roaming profiles of different MNOs and offer them under the same SIM card, the same solution to enhance coverage and to have some redundancy between the two profiles, as well as to represent some cost saving for customers, because some MNOs roaming profiles may be very cost effective in some regions and others can be cost effective in other regions. So multi-IMSI in a way provides that extra flexibility and availability when it comes to solving the global coverage needs. But also multi-IMSI can be used to localize data like a local profile. So if you have an IMSI of a local MNO, for example, in Brazil, and you can use your bootstrap IMSI to switch to the local IMSI, then basically a multi-IMSI will also solve compliance and performance needs coming from customers. So in between roaming-based solutions and multi-IMSI, we have a lot of flexibility to solve for many of the solutions that were discussed before. But then we have also the third solution, which is emerging, which is SGP32 or eSIM more broadly. And that allows localization in certain countries based on the MNO's native profile or native network capabilities. And obviously, when you go to a specific country and you look for a very well-established, proven solution in the same country, taking a leading MNO profile that is working in the country for many years is a very solid solution. And that's the case with eSIM. It provides the MNO's capability in a way that you can localize different MNOs profiles in a simple way with the same SIM card, same API, same support. That's the advantage of SGP32, 22 plus when it comes to customers. So now the question is, how do we blend these solutions for our customers, and how do we provide our customers with the right solution? So if you go to the next slide, I would like to dive into the philosophy that we have. And FlowLive, as some of you may know, we really grew up from owning the technology stack and owning the infrastructure. We do develop in-house the core networks, the connectivity management platform, the billing capabilities, the SIM remote SIM provisioning capabilities, and we stitch them together into a single solution. And for many years, our philosophy was that multi-IMSI is the right way to enhance and solve the global connectivity needs. And I'll talk about it in the next slide. We indeed invested a lot of money and resources to build our multi-IMSI solution and to distribute packet gateways around the world and to connect local MNOs, IMSIs to our solution and allow customers to switch IMSIs very easily. And this is all great, and I think that we are solving problems of customers. But we cannot ignore the need for accommodating the SGP32 solutions in the market. Why? Because customers will need more than just one solution to solve their global connectivity needs. For many use cases, plain roaming is still good enough. And we need to admit it. We need to say, okay, these use cases, for example, tracking something that moves between one location to the other and stays in each location a very short amount of time, no compliance issues, no performance issues. Well, roaming is still good enough. Maybe the device is not strong enough to have more than that. That's still good enough. There are other use cases like automotive use cases with heavy payload and heavy regulatory needs, where you need a full MNO's local profile to really address the needs, maybe with VoLTE as well. And in between, there are many, many use cases that multi-IMSI can really provide the best solution. And as enablers for MNOs and MVNOs, we don't think that we should limit and pitch for a single solution. We strongly believe that the service providers of the world, the audience of this webinar really, that are going to serve different customers' needs in different regions, we need to have in our toolbox the different tools to support our customers' needs. And this is why where we are evolving towards is that we will have this CMP aggregator, the overlay of the CMP, if you may, that is connecting with the MNOs connectivity management platform in the good old way, meaning through their APIs, through their connectivity management platforms, whether it's Aries or Jasper or Vodafone GDSP or whatever, and basically consume their SGP32 or 22+32 profiles. And still the aggregator will provide all the benefits of the simplicity, meaning a single API, a single pane of glass, a single bill, a single contact, etc. So first of all, that should be available for customers. And we definitely think that although we've made an extensive investment in building a global network based on core networks distributed globally, etc., we must allow our customers to have the option to also benefit from the SGP32 benefits. This is one, this is clear. And then if customers would like to also get benefit of our vast global infrastructure, the multi-IMSI solution and all that, then they can also, wherever applicable, use the FlowLive native solution. And if you double click on the right side of the screen there, on the FlowLive solution, we can move to the next slide. Then customers will basically be introduced with a FlowLive philosophy, which I think, again, solved a great deal of the customer use cases. And the philosophy is as follows. You know, we're looking on distributing mobile cores all around the world, mobile cores that we develop and we maintain and we manage in the field. We integrate these mobile cores with many MNOs around the world. We interconnect all these mobile cores into one single solution that runs with the same connectivity management capabilities, real-time visibility, the SIM management, the billing, etc. And we augment this global solution, which aggregates images of many different operators around the world. We augment that with satellite coverage where needed. That's the philosophy. So if you look on these two layers of the solution that you're looking at, the message is simple. The message is customers are coming with different needs. Even the same customers may have different needs within their fleet of SIMs. And we should have in our toolbox as service providers, we should have in our toolbox the different tools to support customers in different ways, as long as we address the 7 golden requirements we've covered before, and as long as we keep it simple for our customers to go and manage, because they care less about security. They care about their business. We need to take care of security. And that's the philosophy of the solution that we are aiming to have in this respect. Let's move on to the next slide and cover a little bit more of that. So this is why we are building this single platform. You know, it's one platform with multiple services, because we don't want to limit our service providers customers, our MNO customers. We would like them to have the entire set of capabilities they need to serve their customers, and we would like to do it on a single platform, so we keep simplicity and operational efficiency in place. And one thing to emphasize in this regard, we're talking about simplicity and efficiency, and it goes down to cost, because we as service providers, the challenge that we always have is not how we serve the first 1 million SIMs. That's fine, you know, we can build different things. It can be one-off, it can be something that will sustain for a long time, etc. For me, the question is, what is the cost of my 1 million and one SIM? What is the marginal unit cost that we need to pay across the board for the entire set of technologies, solutions, infrastructure that we build to serve our customers? And we know the competition in the market. We know that it needs to be very low to correspond with the outputs of the IoT connectivity business. And therefore, serving the entire set of capabilities on a single platform with a consistent set of technical abilities, in our case, all developed in-house, is not only for simplicity and efficiency, but definitely also for cost saving. Because we don't want our customers to go and fetch core network from Cisco and billing system from Amdocs and connectivity management system from, and then their cost is becoming completely irrational. The idea is to be able to be in a position that says, we know the customer's needs. We would like to add all the capabilities into a single stack so our customers can really serve customers in the way they need. And if this is SGP32, so be it. and this is multi-IMSI, that's fine. And roaming is also a valid solution for many use cases. So why don't we use that when needed? And then if you go to the next slide, we just released earlier this week or late last week, a press release that basically Syntel went out with. And we're very proud of this press release. And I'll tell you why we're proud of this press release, because the press release that was launched by Syntel talks about what we are building together with Syntel. And this is exactly the story that we're talking about here. We're not talking about a single component or coverage in a specific country or a single technology that we enable to go there. We're talking about a vision that says we need to have an aggregator that allows Syntel to consume profiles of different other MNOs as needed, and allows Syntel to use the FlowLive global coverage with the MNOs that are already working with FlowLive, and need to use the FlowLive global array of packet gateways where needed to localize the payload of the customer's devices, and need to use the other capability that are coming in together to meet the 7 golden requirements of the customers at a cost that allows Syntel to be competitive, and that allows the customers of Syntel to do their business in a cost-efficient way. And this is why we think it's very important for us, and we are very happy to get this press release coming out from Syntel. And of course, I'm happy to talk about it offline where needed. And then if you go to the last slide, and I'll finish there, there are obviously questions about AI and the use of AI. And this webinar is not about AI. I think we should have a webinar about AI, but I will just say the following. When we talk about AI, the very obvious things that come in mind when we talk about AI is, okay, we use AI to make our solution more efficient. Of course, we should, and we do. We use AI to provide customers with more visibility, more control, alarms and alerts. Of course, obvious. We provide our customers with means of capping their costs with the different solutions they use. Of course, we should. Very obvious. We use AI to make security better. Of course, we should. But we think it's not enough. All these things that we can achieve by deploying AI deeply into the smart pipes that we build, deeply into the technology stack that we provide, this is all mandatory, but not enough. The question that I would like to leave on the table, and I will not answer it today, is can we use AI to tell the customers what they want to hear about their business for what we learn from the network? I think that's the question. And I think that's the thing we should be dealing with as networking and connectivity providers in the market. And for us, it's a fascinating question, and maybe we'll leave it open for the next time. Back to you, John. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. And that's a really interesting blend, I think, of how you've been doing that, but then also, like you say, that flexibility in different approaches, to meet, the various requirements that end customers will have. Right, so that's fantastic. And thank you to the audience as well for the questions that have been coming in. So, Victor, Adam, Caitlin, Michelle, as we see them. So it brings us on very nicely to the bit of remaining time, and we had about 5 to 10 minutes left. So let's go through some of these questions as well. So we had some discussion points up as well. So we have, I think, a bit of time to cover both some of the discussion points that we wanted to go through with Nir and Stefan, and then address some of these questions as well. So it's perfect. So, Stefan, Nir, stay with me, because there's a few kind of discussion points that'd be really interesting just to get your, I guess, quick take on as well for the audience. Now, ironically, Nir, you said there should be a separate session on AI. The first question I have for you is about AI. So there you go. I'm just going to bring it back to that, and then we'll move on, right? And we'll spend the rest of the webinar on other topics. But it's clearly a buzzword in the industry, right? But we've seen as well that from a service provider perspective, it's starting to be demanded as well from their customers. So I guess the fundamental question, right, is what is meant here by AI, and beyond, with respect, beyond kind of hype and buzz behind it, what's the practical, actual benefit that it can provide to customers? So keen to get your views on that, and then Stefan can chime in with thoughts afterwards. But now I'll hand that to you first.
Yeah. So I'll answer it with just going a little bit deeper of what I discussed before. We meaning the service providers of the connectivity, the network owners, the MNOs, the MVNOs, we own a lot of metadata, right? The signaling data, the billing data. We don't touch the payload, obviously, but we know everything else. And like in any other domain, when you have the data and you apply the models on top of it, you can learn a lot. And I was just pointing out before a few areas where we can deliver clear value for customers. I spoke about using AI for better security, for cost control, for being able to manage the fleet of devices more easily with proactive insights coming from the network towards the customers. These are I call it the obvious things that we are doing and we have to do. And as I hinted before, I think it can go beyond that. I think that we can use the combination of all the data we have with the smart models we are putting on top to bring value to customers beyond networking and connectivity or security value that we bring today, like more towards their business. And I think that that's the challenge we are looking at. This is one. The second thing is, the conversations about AI in the market. Shall we put AI at the edge? Shall we put AI at the cloud? How do you build it? I'm talking about customers' applications, not talking about connectivity specifically. And I think that it's our obligation in a way to build networks in a smart way that can really facilitate any choice that customers are making in terms of how they want to deploy AI to their systems. Different choices of customers may derive different network requirements, and it's our job to foresee these needs and to build the networks in a flexible way that whichever path customers are choosing to deploy AI for their fleet of devices in the field, we are going to be ready there with the networks to support that. This is another angle that I think is sitting on our table.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for that. Stefan, I don't know if from your perspective, there's anything you'd want to add into that?
I mean, in terms perhaps of what we see more generally in the market, I mean, Nir has already mentioned security use case. I mean, what we see in some other areas are emerging things like from a connectivity management perspective, applying AI into Gen AI, let's say, into the platform itself to help in terms of diagnostics and customer service, reducing tickets and improving resolution times, of course. These are very early steps that I see. Some small steps towards, what's happening with the fleet. Can I identify any trends, typically targeted towards more, let's say, less technical customers of platforms? I think what I see is perhaps more interesting and closer to what Nir is envisioning is, some steps towards closed loop systems where you can actually understand what is happening with the network. You can understand context. We've talked about regulation. We've talked about various other things. How do you optimize that in a more autonomous manner, especially at scale? I think that's one of the areas that we'll probably see being developed, at least from the feedback that I get over the coming years.
Thanks, Steph. Hopefully, Adam, as well, that helps give some into the question that you asked earlier on as well on applications. So, okay, fantastic. Let's quickly then move on to take another one of these points. And so here's one going back to the survey findings that Stefan showed as well. So we saw from the survey how some MNOs struggle to provide that kind of real-time visibility for their customers, and they struggle more than the non-MNO audience. So really keen to understand, and Nir, I'll start with yourself there as well. So your thoughts on why is that, firstly, and then secondly, why real-time visibility, why is it increasingly important to customers today?
Let me start with the second one, and then I'll go to the first one. First of all, it is important because if you want to develop AI-based systems, you need the data, you need it in real time. So in a way, to start with, real-time data transmission between the different nodes to a centralized data lake, if you may, is a mandatory prerequisite for developing applications. This is one. But I think the needs for real time is much more basic. I think that there are two very key or three key needs for that driving real time data. One is everything relates to billing and cost control, if you may, making sure that you don't have outliers, frauds, all these things that you can really prevent by getting all the information in real time and putting some backstops on the traffic of your customers. This is one. The second thing is obviously troubleshooting. If you have real-time events, the signaling events real time in your CMP, and customers are calling to complain that something is not working, you can easily get there and look on the on the connection and check the device did connect, did register, didn't register, transmit data, doesn't transmit data, which RAT type, which radio access, whatever. So that obviously helps a lot in terms of troubleshooting. And last is generally managing the fleet, meaning you simply want to know in real time how many of your devices are connected, where, how many of them should be connected but not connected. Having all the information in real time simply allows you to manage things better, to troubleshoot when things are coming, and to protect yourself from undesired situations in terms of cost and liabilities. That's the main reasons. This is for the second question. Now, I think that most MNOs do have it. It's about, because MNOs have obviously, they have the core networks and they have the information from the core network, and it's their decision if they want to make the core network and the billing information available in real time to their customers. And today it's becoming more and more standard, meaning if you go with not only with FlowLives, but also with the other common IoT connectivity technology stacks in the market, including ours, obviously, then the connection between the billing system, which is real-time OCS, the network, which sends all the signaling events to a single data lake, and combine these two pieces of information to create a single view in real time, is becoming more and more available. And I think that the MNOs that do not have it today will soon have it because they have the core capabilities and they know how to do it. So I think it's coming.
Yeah, perfect. No, thanks, Nir. And do you want to stay with me? I'm going to give you one very last short quick discussion point, and then let's address some of these outstanding audience questions as well, because we've got some really good ones in as well. So final kind of discussion point from those survey findings that we looked at as well, right? So we saw very high positive rate among the respondents for the deployment of the new eSIM IoT specification. So again, my question is from a connectivity service provider perspective, specifically, how important in your view is the new specification, and what impact do you see it having in terms of, service provider strategies and partnerships?
So I think that SGP32 and the local profiles is, as I mentioned before, is a very important additional capability in our toolbox, and we cannot ignore it. I don't think that anyone can seriously look on the future and say, hey, I'm not going to do it. I think that we need to be good advisors to our customers in terms of when and where to use one capability over the other. As I mentioned before, there are still good reasons to use roaming. In some use cases, there are excellent reasons to use multi-IMSI with local packet gateways around the world, and there are good reasons to use SGP32. I'll just give one example. When you use a local MNO profile in a single country with SGP32, you get all the benefits of the local MNO, and local MNO will always be amazing in its own footprint, controlling the radio as well, no doubt. But is the local MNO single profile enough countrywide coverage-wise? If the answer is no, then you may want to consider a roaming IMSI with local packet gateway, where you can get more than one MNO, but still with localized data, right? So it depends on the use case. It depends on the use case. But to your question, I don't think that we have any room for consideration. Anyone that thinks about the future needs to have this one as well, alongside multi-IMSI and roaming-based capabilities.
Completely agree. Okay, fantastic. Let's finish off by taking a couple of these audience questions. Stefan, one for yourself. I mean, I know. Let's take Victor's question from earlier. I know you answered his first question while you were presenting. Let's do the second one now. So he was asking about the market traction that you see for other technology types. So LoRaWAN, Sigfox, NB-IoT specifically. Keen to get your thoughts on that, Stefan.
When we look at we investigate quite, well, what is it, around 30 different leading service providers in terms of connectivity management and connectivity every year. And, as part of that, we look at support for things like LoRaWAN, Sigfox, even in terms of billing capabilities for narrowband. And, from that, I can say we at least see very limited demand for things like LoRaWAN, less demand for Sigfox. I think there's really only one particular cellular player that springs to mind that has a large number of Sigfox connections. And typically as well, the management of these connections is not integrated as a single pane of glass along with cellular deployments. You typically see different portals being used, and so there's not particular overlap. With regards to narrowband IoT, obviously the roaming situation for narrowband is rather dire. You're looking at sub 20% network support globally for inbound narrowband IoT roaming, which is why you need more localization capabilities. Direct-to-device or converged satellite connectivity is an up-and-coming theme, of course. That's addressed in the white paper, by the way. And that is kind of a potential catalyst for more deployments of narrowband IoT, given that it's the first part of non-terrestrial network standard support. But it's a very nascent market still. I mean, commercial operations are really starting. Players are rolling out their constellations. So it's a developing scenario in that regard, I think.
Thanks, Stefan. Do a couple quick more, and then we'll wrap it up for the hour, guys. Okay, so Ned, let me ask you the question that Falgugi sent. How do you handle pre-qualification on device compatibility with multi-IMSIs? Keen to get your views on that.
Yeah, just very quickly. You want to use multi-IMSI when you can be sure that the devices can consume different IMSIs easily and can switch between one IMSI to the other, even when they do not have network connection, right? Because that's the whole purpose of providing higher resiliency to the network by having at least two IMSIs on the same SIM card. We specifically at FlowLive, and I don't think that we are unique in this specific regard, but we specifically at FlowLive, where we enter a multi-IMSI situation with customers, which is the vast majority of the cases, we have a procedure of testing the devices with our teams, including what we call the autonomous switch, the ability to move between IMSIs with no network connection, the over-the-air IMSI switch that sometimes is required when you want to flip and change the IMSI on the SIM card. And we're doing some stress tests in terms of what happens if you have no coverage, little coverage, etc. So it's just a set process that we have in-house based on all our experience in the field along the years with different devices behaving with multi-IMSI.
Perfect. And thank you so much for that. We're going to draw it to a close there, given that we've got to the hour. But for those questions that we didn't get to, so James, David, Michelle, don't worry, we'll follow up with you post-event. And if there are other questions that you get when you receive your emails post-event, please do follow up with us as well. I think there's a lot more that we'd love to keep discussing with you, and I'm sure Neil and the FlowLive team as well. But thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that's been a really informative session for your own strategies. Do stay tuned to your emails post-event to action these resources, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care for now, and bye-bye.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.